It's almost 8. The sun's on its way up. Um, I crashed halfway through eating my pizza. Um, I said I was sober, and I was, but I was tired. And now I'm a little bit dehydrated. Um, but something I wanted to point out before I went to sleep last night is that I had a little bit of a discussion at the bar about politics, as I normally would. And something that came up that seemed to um, have a little bit more of a stable response um, was the discussion of the economics of the wall that Trump is um, pondering out loud. Um, and I think that the reason why I got kind of a positive response to that was because it's not happening. Nobody's doing this. And it's really remarkable how you can have a country that is so obsessed with putting the economy ahead of everything, and then somebody comes up with this policy that has clear economic implications, and nobody analyzes it. Can you point me towards an economic analysis of Trump's wall? Because I haven't seen one. Maybe I just haven't seen it. Maybe it exists, but if it does, it's certainly not in the mainstream media. Um, so what would actually happen to the economy if Trump built a wall? Well, he's um, fighting or he's pushing the argument on the uh, idea that the the Mexicans that go back and forth over the border are um, have a heightened level of criminality um, and quote unquote steal Americans' jobs. Um, when people talk about how they quote unquote steal Americans' jobs, they seem to forget that they're doing it for less than minimum wage. It's not. It's not like Americans are competing against Mexicans on an open market. That would be the false perception of things and not how things actually are. Um, and if they were, then they would be losing, right? And then um, putting the wall up would be government interference into a market, um, which you would think would upset the same people that are arguing for it. What seems to be underlying it is this sort of strange idea that they're stealing good jobs. Um, and if you just put up a wall and keep them out, then Americans will get good jobs. It's amazingly ignorant of the economic reality that's there, although it is reflective of the reality that there's not a lot of economic opportunities in a lot of these areas, and the fact of the matter being that the uh, trade regimes that exist are not helping the people that live in these areas. A better idea than building a wall might be pulling out of NAFTA. Um, that's actually what people want and would actually help people get to the goals that they want to get to. Not building a wall. But what would building a wall do? What would the actual consequences of that be? I think that to realize this, you have to understand what the legal category that migrants are in the United States. Somebody who is a bit of an authority on this and that I will defer to is Chomsky's daughter. I believe her name is Aviva. Although she will forever be known as Chomsky's daughter, which I'm sure is somewhat annoying. But I mean, you could have worse things happen to you. But she is somewhat of an authority there, and someone to defer to. The whole legal structure and basis of the way that migrants are legally interpreted in the United States is not similar to an immigrant or migrant scenario that most people are familiar with as a consequence of their own migration to this continent. I have a low battery, so I'm going to have to swap this out. Okay, I'm back. So in fact, the entire legal framework of how the American state interprets what a migrant worker is descended not from the system of European colonization and immigration, but more from what the systems of labor that those colonizers used, namely slavery. So when we talk about migrant workers, it's kind of an abusive language. And because it's an abusive language, it leads us to be confused as to what these people's legal status actually is. In fact, instead of talking about migrants, we should be talking about slaves, because that is the legal framework that is in place to administer the seasonal migrant workers that come back and forth over the border, and that the defense would be most effective in preventing. So, I will get a little bit more sleep. So, to talk about a fence that prevents migration is not. It's not really correct language relative to what to what an immigrant is in the United States, to what a migrant is, to what a temporary worker is, and to what a slave is. It really is more along the lines of that what Trump is talking about is abolishing slavery. And he has no understanding of that, as far as I can see. He may be, hiding something, but I see no real evidence that he at all understands what he's saying on this point. So let's talk about what would actually happen. Well, if you prevented migrant workers from coming over and working the fields, then you would have to pay native Californians to do it, or let the food rot. If the food rots, then you end up with food shortages. And if you have to pay native Californians, then now you're paying people that have rights because they're legal citizens. And the wage that you pay these people is going to double or triple to minimum wage, because the migrants who are not citizens, who are not legally people in the United States, who are protected by no labor laws, are able to work at slave labor prices, which is the point of the entire system that exists. Um, Border guards look the other way. The migrants are allowed to move back and forth over the border, and they're allowed to do that because it provides a steady stream of slave labor to the producers in California, who then exploit that slave labor in producing food for the rest of the continent. So the consequence of building a wall and preventing that flow of migrant temporary labor, of slave labor, is that the price of food would double or triple. So that's the first thing you have to realize. We're talking about what are the actual economic consequences of Trump building a wall over Mexico? Food prices will probably triple, if not more than that. So you're looking at hyperinflation in food. And go ahead, ask an economist; they'll tell you that. The entire economy becomes massively altered as soon as that happens. No. I need to be clear. I'm not particularly keen on slavery. Um, it's not exactly something that I think should exist. Um, but there needs to be other solutions in place to try to address it. Creating a divide and conquer strategy between Mexicans and white Californians, or white and black Californians as it may be, is not a positive step forward. We don't need racial conflicts and ethnic wars. And transferring all of the it might create jobs in the region, but ultimately, this is not a substantial increase of standard of living of anybody. You take people out of a McDonald's and you put them in a field picking strawberries, or whatever else, if you can even get them to do it. This isn't really much of a step forward. What would be a step forward would be if you could socialize the workers, or have them, think in more socialized terms, to build unions, and to take control, and reduce the profit margin by eliminating the management class. That's a way that this can be done that won't put the price through the roof, is eliminating management. Because ultimately the reason that that's where the dead weight is. That's where the wasteful part of the process is that you're paying a boss. And for something like this, it's not really necessary. You just need to, you put a union rep in a marketing department and oversees a bunch of trucks. It's not complicated. You pick berries out of the field, you put them in a box, and you shove them off. We don't need a management class making, upper middle class salaries on top of slave labor to do it. There's solutions that are better. Even if I acknowledge that, okay, well, if you build a wall, then yeah, more people will get paid better for work that's done. But the consequence of that is that, with the economic system that's in place right now, things as they are, we will see an incredible increase in the price of food. I said 2 or 3 times as much. That might be underestimating. Okay, so and then if we're lucky, that spurs innovation towards other options. So you might see more greenhouse growing, um, which then you end up with demand going down in the region, and then you end up with people without jobs again. So it's um, there's really no way to conclude that this is a positive for the economy in the region, even if you acknowledge the status quo is pretty shitty. Changing the status quo might be a good idea, but this is this is not the way to do it. Um, and if you look at some of Trump's other plans, um, like his flat tax plan is ridiculous. Um, you're just gonna end up with like the country's gonna be bankrupt, right? So I mean that's two immediate consequences of Trump's policies. You're looking at the country is going. Um, the country can't go broke. I mean that just makes sense, right? But um, um, it can um, suffer very large deficits, and that can have an effect on its currency, on its credit rating, and these sorts of things, right? So, um, those are two immediate consequences of his policies. The first one is that he won't generate enough tax revenue and then he says he wants to spend money in the military, right? So it's just start banging your head against the wall, right? You're gonna slash taxes and increase military spending. Are there any? Is there any money left for people? Um, well, don't even ask that question. Of course, there's not. You know, maybe they can make a few dollars digging their own graves. Um, there's that, and there's the actual very concrete, very easy to understand, and like I said, ask any economist; they will uphold this very stark truth that if he builds that wall, you're going to be paying 3 times as much for food, at least. So that's something to think about as you're pulling the lever, or dumping your finger in the ink, or simply marking an X on a ballot. Um, I'm not sure how things are done uh, in your country anymore, but um, as a Canadian, I'll certainly feel the price change as well. On top of the dollar up here going down, that could be catastrophic for us. We would have to really take a good look at this idea of food security, um, which again is probably a net positive, but the short-term implications are just very, very dramatic. And something that, if you plan on being poor for the next 4 or 5 years, you might want to take note of before you vote for this guy. He's talking about the files or the charges that have been filed against Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, as they related to her role in the French Conservative Party. And they're pointing out they don't really understand what's going on. Again, I think you have to keep in mind the biases of this stream of information. Not knowing what's going on, and not really wanting to tell us what they think is going on. I think that it's pretty clear that the quote-unquote election of Sarkozy was connected with a number of replacements or friendly regime changes in the broader American empire as a consequence of the pushback for the invasion of Iraq. And so you saw this sort of string of replacements. You saw Jean Chrétien replaced, first with Paul Martin and then with Stephen Harper. You saw um, uh, Jacques Chirac replaced with Sarkozy. And you saw, who was the German chancellor? Was it Schroeder? Was it Gerhard Schroeder at the time? I think it was. Replaced with, my brain just froze on me, with Angela Merkel. You didn't see Tony Blair replaced. That took a little bit longer to happen. Because Tony Blair did what he said, or did what he was told. Right? So, and so there was this sort of, string, of things happening, and some of it, like you saw the opposite happen in Spain, and which may have not been considered as important, and all these sorts of things. But so when you see corruption scandals come up out of the election, quote unquote, of Sarkozy in France, you have to put it in that context. It was dirty, very, very dirty. From the whole thing was very, very dirty, and it remains very, very dirty. And there's going to be a lot of dirty information coming out of that for quite some time. It's unclear whether the full narrative will ever come out, but at the very least, there's a lot of ammunition there to use against people that came out of it, in the French domestic sphere, which is what the charges were about. It was the ruling party in France trying to do a little bit of payback, to the to the party that used some dirty tricks in the preceding election cycle. So yeah, I mean, it's just when you see these sorts of accusations, come out of that period, or you see these corruption scandals develop out of anything that has to do with this process of replacement that occurred. It's a good idea to put it in context of the war in Iraq, in order to really kind of get your head around what it is that people are doing, either in a broader scheme, or on a domestic level. I think that Angela Merkel should hope that she dies in office. And to be blunt with you, I think that the Americans could very well facilitate that. So I'm going through the vlogs over the last week, and I'm realizing that there's like several days where I'm almost completely neglecting the vlogging aspect of this in favor of relying or putting a lot of focus on the reacts part of it, and it is very much the truth that I'm doing this. Not really a big part of the reason I'm doing this is because the commenting wasn't. I've been shut down, right? And they can't shut me down like this, so I'm gonna do this instead. But it's still if I'm gonna do this, I should do it right. Like what I'm trying to present is not how I look, or talking to a mirror, talking about my socks, or whatever other pointless thing it is that I'm doing today, like
I'm not doing that. That's not my point. My point is, what I'm thinking, maybe to try to get across a couple of experiences. And if the day is such that I'm just, like what I'm doing is archiving, then there really isn't much to say. But I need to put a bigger focus on, um, like I said, the focus is not this, the focus is this, but that doesn't mean that I need to not completely ignore this, because this exists and it's part of what is going to um, uh, attract people on a surface level. Um, I think it's pretty clear they won't stay around very long, if they're not interested in this too. But I need to deal with reality on that point, right? I said I wanted to adjust to learn the lesson and to move forwards. I think that is meaning, I'm going to focus a little bit less on, the images and, image, but at the same time, I can't completely discard the reality that, this is the world we live in. So, we're going to be doing a little bit more FaceTime. That's just how it's going to have to be. I've got a little bit of uploading and watching to do today. I did most of the splicing last night when I was showering, and I got a big edit out last night when I went to the show. I could have got a little bit more before I went to sleep, but I didn't. But I need to watch a bunch of stuff for the next couple of hours. I think that by midnight I'll be transferred over into just doing only the the Gmail aspect of it, and I was kind of hoping that I could get through the Gmail by the end of the weekend. That might not happen, especially considering that it looks like tomorrow is grocery day. I'm going to have to double check that, but I think that the money got transferred into my account overnight. And tomorrow's going to be warm, so I got to take advantage of that, even if it means, well, I'm sure the whole city is thinking that. There's some things that are always the same, and hopefully, hopefully if I can get out early enough, I'm not fighting with anyone. So we'll have to figure all that out overnight. But that's the deal for today. Is getting over that point. I've been saying this for several days now, but I'm almost done, or at least almost at that point where things can self-sustain themselves. It's not quite there, but it won't be too much longer. And once I'm at that point, then it's just smooth sailing. I think I'm good to go, even if it does take a little bit longer. I'm going to give myself a cutoff point for this for March 17th, which is way later than I wanted. But that's it's the middle of March, but just a little bit past, so it's a couple of extra days. I mean, I'm aiming for the 15th of March, and I'm going to give myself a couple of extra days. If I'm not done clearing things out by that point, then I'm going to have to stop, ask myself what exactly have I been doing for the last 3 months. Do I want to keep doing this? How much longer is it going to take? But because I want to get back to work. I want to do some recording. It's just I feel that this is really necessary to, I never thought that I would have to be worried about, internet systems, destroying your writing. I never thought that would be a real issue. You put a certain amount of faith in the systems that you're using. It's disappointing. But this is the reality of it, and I need to find ways around it. So, it's not what I wanted to be doing, but I've been thrust into this, and so be it. But I have to give myself an exit strategy here. I can't just keep doing this forever. I gotta find a way out. So, mid-March, like I say, by the end of the night, I should be hopefully into what I'm calling a sweet spot, where I can just sit down and just plow through that and get to the next stage of it. Hopefully. It's hard to say. An economic truth that has arisen over the last several decades is the reality that individualistic feminism, the kind that argues that women's liberation is tied into increasing economic freedom, is inconsistent with technological innovation and automation. That is, these ideas are moving in different directions. That is to say that the increasing elimination of labor through the expansion of technology is happening at the same time as increasing female participation in the labor market. This has led to structural unemployment levels, and it is single men who have been most affected by it. There's a lot of reasons why this could be seen as progress, and the rising problem of unemployment for single men as collateral damage. But this is a short-sighted way to look at things. There are costs to unemployment that all of society, including employed women, need to pay. If you're one of the social engineers at the top, you need to weigh positives off against negatives and work out cost-benefit analyses. Does a higher level of talent that women bring to the workforce offset the necessary deadweight created by increasing male unemployment? And how is this system to react to forecasts for increasing levels of structural unemployment? All this is creating an alliance between certain progressive strains of thought and certain conservative strains of thought to put greater emphasis on the role of the family, as it is the most economical way for the elite to order society. As an anarchist, I realize that liberal approaches to feminism are not emancipatory. One is not less free in the family than they are in the workforce. These are two broadly equivalent expressions of slavery. True emancipation can only be achieved by abolishing currency relations and working towards full communism. But it has long been understood that the perception of freedom is more important than the actualization of it. It is enough that you think you are free. The economics of the situation are not up for question. They're agreed upon across the spectrum. For an example of a flat-out Marxist thinker that believes that individualist feminism will collapse capitalism as we understand it through mass unemployment, see Richard Wolff. So we're going to be seeing an increase in this kind of brainwashing in the near future. It's back to the kitchen, ladies. A technology-based economy can only support a fraction of the jobs, and it's just cheaper to convince you to stay at home than it is to hand out welfare checks for single dudes. It was a reaction to the blatant propaganda of the recent Fifth Harmony video called Work From Home, and it's featuring a Thai dollar sign. How about a... I don't know much about this band. If you want to call it a band, I looked it up a little bit as I was writing this, and it's like the most obvious example of totally constructed, money generating machine that I've ever seen. You can find pictures of these girls from a few years ago where like you can't even recognize them. They've been put through so much plastic surgery, massive, workout regimens. Like their dances are clearly scripted. There's not a thing in this video that looks like it came from those people that you see in the video. To suggest that they're even being orchestrated is absurd. The proper understanding, that from what I can see, is that they're paid actresses. Essentially, backup dancers. It's like, let's get rid of the singer and just, let's just have the backup dancers. And let's script them right from the start. Let's put them through years of intensive, sex slave study or training, and this is the result of it. It's just total establishment propaganda, right down to the featured rapper who carries the name Dollar Sign. It's I mean, this isn't new. You go back to the 60s, or I can only go back as far as the 60s, and I can see all the same aspects of media manipulation going back that far. This is old hat. Really, the only thing that's changed is that as time has gone on, their methods seem to be getting a little bit more
I don't want to say sophisticated so much as more efficient. Um, like this seems like it's like built from the bottom up to generate cash. I don't know how long that'll exist for. I don't know, give it 6 months or something, and then it goes away. But the amount that they make on on that one burst of money flow coming in seems to be enough to generate the expenditure. Or maybe not. Maybe they're losing money and they're just trying to get it out there. I don't know, but I've never seen anything so fake. I've never seen anything so orchestrated, and I've never seen anything that's so obviously operating almost purely at a propaganda level. I mean, like there's no pretension towards artistry here. It's just utter, total, pure propaganda. Anyways, I'm getting back to what I was doing. That's it was just so outrageous that I had to comment on it. So the primary results came in out of South Carolina today, and as expected, Hillary Clinton won by a very large margin. So I want to talk about this a little bit. I'm reacting to an article that's at 538.com. It's I'm not sure if it was somebody there that wrote it or if it's being held onto, being hosted there in syndication. Those sites, you never know if they actually wrote it or if they're just pulling something up, and I didn't check. But it's very much the mainstream narrative. Hillary's inevitable. The resistance is futile. So this is what I have to say about that. This is all very true, but it's not surprising. It's been clear for quite a while that despite having a solid civil rights record and despite Clinton having a clearly racist record, Sanders cannot beat Bill's saxophone and perhaps Obama's quasi-endorsement. It's a sad reflection of the voter base, but everybody saw this coming. Sanders has to do something that has not been done in a long time. He has to ride white liberal support to beat black conservative support. This is different than in 2008, where the difference was less ideological. I think that Sanders could conceivably win big in both California and New York. I haven't seen polls for either, but Massachusetts is a better comparison than South Carolina, and some polls have him beating Clinton in Massachusetts by over 70 points. That's right, over 70 points. It's not really black versus white, it's more north versus south, which means liberal versus conservative. Red versus blue, and it's a big deal. Iowa and Nevada are purple states, and they split the delegates. New Hampshire is a blue state, and Sanders won huge. South Carolina is a red state, and Clinton won huge. That is the dynamic that you are likely to see repeated. Clinton is going to win red states, and Sanders is going to win blue states, and both by substantial margins, because that is the real split that is developing. It's not identity, it's ideology. Although I still think Sanders would be doing a lot better if he was a Christian and appealed more to the Christian conservative base of Southern black Democrat voters. See, here's the thing. If Clinton wins, then it means that liberals will be void of a candidate, and it opens up a space for a third-party run. And I'm not joking. If this pattern holds and Sanders wins all of the blue states by 50%, and Clinton wins all of the red states by 50%, well, what other conclusion is there than that the blue states need to back a new party? Because the Democrats, the system isn't giving them what they're voting for. It's not a new thing either. Maybe they need to modernize the delegate structure so that it gives less power to red or conservative or southern states, who used to be Democrat locks, remember. But northern liberals have been getting reamed by this party for decades. They want universal health care. They want to tone down the military-industrial complex. They want lower tuition. They're liberals, and they're unable to get anything through because they're held up at gunpoint by a delegate system that wants to define the race by who wins in South Carolina. Bernie has a hill to climb, clearly, but I am certain that the Clinton campaign is going to be dramatically disappointed by numbers from California and New York. The question is whether it's enough that he can catch her or not. The odds are against him, maybe,
the conventional wisdom, sure. All of this whole, the TV building, and momentum and all that kind of thing, that's all against him. Okay, but the numbers from blue states are consistent. Sanders is their overwhelming choice. And so this is far from over. This page will soon be wiped down like the other one. My vlogs are staggered by a week, but this topic will present itself in time. Bernie is likely to come out of Super Tuesday down pretty far in the delegate count, even if he wins by 70 points in New England, and I think he just might. I continue to think that he has a fighting chance to come back based on a strong showing in California, representing himself as the liberal counterweight to Hillary's rather blatant conservatism. California is a reliably liberal state. Combined with New York, it has a huge number of delegates. It's actually 837 together. This is Bernie's actual path to victory. He has to sweep liberals. It doesn't matter what color they are, or who they have sex with, or what gender they are. And in fact, getting that point across is really fundamental. So he's doing this right. It's just that it's not an easy thing to do. And I'm a realist. It's not over, but it's clear who is winning. Bernie ought to sweep liberals, but he ought to have won the civil rights vote too. And maybe he did. Maybe the takeaway lies in a really strong reevaluation of what drives black voters in 2016. Likewise, the Republican primary is pretty much over. Cruz will drop out if he doesn't win Texas. Rubio will drop out if Cruz does win Texas, because he's not going to win anything. It's pretty clear that Trump will win every state on Tuesday, with the possible exception of Texas. But neither Cruz nor Rubio benefit from the other dropping nearly as much as some might think. Cruz would pick up a bit more from Rubio than Rubio would from Cruz. And the numbers just don't get there. Neither has a serious chance, and that will be made obvious on Tuesday. But Kasich is still standing, and he consequently has a real chance of cleaning up when the blue states hit the schedule. But this is again an abstraction. The reality is that Trump probably coasts. Then what's left? Trump versus Clinton? I couldn't care less. They're both catastrophes. As I've stated a few times here, I honestly don't think that Trump makes it past the inauguration alive. So we're stuck with probably 8 more years of imperialism and austerity. So I'm not going to get in between a Trump-Clinton election. Americans may not realize how important the American election cycle is to Canadians, but it is very important. As one example, consider healthcare. The biggest problem facing our healthcare system is its geographic proximity to the United States. Just about the best thing that could happen to Canadian healthcare is the adoption of a single-payer system in the United States. That would eliminate a massive corrupt market from being less than 100 miles from almost all of the population. I have selfish reasons for supporting Sanders on this point. Another is inflation. Our dollar tends to move with the American dollar. Yes, it's tied to oil, but it's also almost always moving in the same direction as the USD. So when our dollar goes up relative to the USD, that usually means it's climbing faster. And when our dollar falls relative to the USD, that usually means it's falling faster. There's also the question of the cost of food, because we import a lot of our food from the United States. Inflationary pressures in the United States can have a huge effect on us. So consider Trump's wall, for example. That's going to dramatically increase the price of strawberries. I'm already pissed that they're too expensive. Another issue is foreign policy. We're tied together through NATO, and we'd like to be good neighbors. So we want to contribute the way that we can. But Canadians are not a warring people. We want peace. So it's in our interest to support candidates that want to reduce the number of wars that NATO is involved in. That's just 3 obvious issues. There's many more. There's NAFTA and TPP. There's climate change. There's border security. I mean, listen. America is the empire. Everybody is affected by what they do. But we are in much greater proximity. A famous leader of ours said that it was like sleeping with an elephant. No matter how friendly relations may be, every twitch is dramatically felt. And this is very much true. So, I mean, you'd have you'd have a lot of nerve to tell people not to interfere, as though America never interferes in events outside its borders, right? Get fucking real. But Canada is far too invested to not interfere, and America will just have to deal with that. Get used to it. We're not going away, and we want to say, and we will not be quiet. But I can't pick a side if the election is Trump versus Clinton. They're both too awful. I could loudly argue for Sanders, and I could loudly argue against both Trump and Clinton, but I'm not seeing a reason to root for one or the other. I think Clinton would be better domestically, if barely. However, I actually think that Trump would be less inclined towards interventionist conflict. He strikes me as more of an isolationist. I'd prefer Trump's foreign policy. I could maybe get involved with a third candidate, or if Sanders manages to get ahead in the ways I'm suggesting, but I think my interest in this cycle is closed. I just don't see much that's going to excite me. Although I'll close off with one more observation, I think I'm probably pretty reflective of a general opinion. If Hillary wins and barely carries any blue states, and Trump wins with weak support from conservatives, you could see record low turnout. 45% turnout. It was about 7 in the morning, and I was hoping I could stay up all night and get a little bit of grocery shopping and other things done today. Unfortunately, my stomach ache has clicked in. It's warming up today, so it's a pressure shift. Again, it's entirely consistent. Amazingly predictable. So I need to lie down. I don't know how long it'll last for. I'll see you in a few hours.